Coming up on Point Spread Weekly, powered by the Vegas Stats and Information Network. We want to make you a better handicapper, and we've got plenty of sports wagering information. Join VSiN's betting experts and odds makers as they discuss sides, totals, money lines, props, and parlays, so you take sharper action. Cashing tickets is what it's all about. It's Point Spread Weekly, powered by VSiN, and it starts right now.
Welcome in, Point Spread Weekly. Yes, here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. We do it every single week. Thus the name. I am your trusty and humble guide through the next hour, Jonathan Von Tobel. And a great hour it will be. Steve Makinen is going to join us. He is back after taking time off that I did not approve, but he will be with us to discuss everything that he has done for Point Spread Weekly this week. We will also have with us William Hill as we continue to dive through his pieces on the National Football League. Lou Finocchiaro is going to be with us near the end of the show. Fight Island, massive debut, which is, by the way, our cover story for this week, as UFC 251 takes center stage with a loaded fight, count them, 3 title bouts on the card, and we will have analysis on that with Lou Finocchiaro later in the show. And as we have dubbed, and yet nobody has gotten production for yet, the Run for the Roses with Ron Flatter, as we continue to make our way towards the Kentucky Derby in this wacky and zany world that has been ravaged by the coronavirus. But a very good issue this week, and a benchmark issue at that. We'll have details with Steve Makinen. I think 150 is a key number, which we will discuss. But Matt Youmans, of course, leads us off, as we always do, in Point Spread Weekly, our senior editor, great writer as well. Youmans with the NFL runners rarely move the point spread. What we talk about all the time, right? What is player X's value to a point spread? And in the National Football League, the one player in terms of position that is going to affect the point spread regularly, and in the futures market as well, is going to be quarterback. The quarterback is the most valuable position, and it gets only even more valuable depending on the quarterback that you have behind your guy. Good example, we talk about Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott is a damn good quarterback, but his backup is Andy Dalton. And so Dak Prescott, even though he is very good, is not going to be worth as much to a point spread because Andy Dalton is the guy behind him. But in a situation like, let's go with, I don't know, is it Chad Henne in Kansas City behind a guy like Patrick Mahomes? Patrick Mahomes is clearly worth to the point spread a lot, but it's not because he's awesome. It's because the guy beneath him is so much farther off what he actually is. So why do I bring that up? Because, of course, the point of Youmans' piece talking about running backs and their value to a point spread, and what running backs the NFL sees right now that has the most value according to Chris Andrews. I bet you can guess right now in terms of value which one means the most. It's not actually Derrick Henry. That would be Ezekiel Elliott, according to Chris Andrews, for the Cowboys, worth 2 points to a point spread. This is an interesting conversation to me to be had when it comes to running backs and their value. And again, this is Chris's opinion, and this isn't to tear Chris's opinion apart. And it's like the evolving conversation on home field advantage and what that means, right? It used to be 3. There's real conversations that it's actually getting less and less and less to the point where maybe it's actually beneath 2 points in the NFL home field advantage. But with the evolution of a guy like I brought up, Dak Prescott, with how good he has been, with how great that wide receiving core is, with that shift in the offense being to a more pass-happy attack, does Zeke Elliott's value actually decrease now? And it's not because Ezekiel Elliott's not any good, but it's because the offense has changed and that losing him is a little less impactful because of the way that they have run their offense. So Ezekiel Elliott, according to Chris, worth 2 points. Right behind him, Derrick Henry of the Titans, worth 2 points. This is one I'd push back against as well, mainly because I think Derrick Henry's value has been really overblown because of the 7-8 game sample size that we saw, including the postseason last year. I mean, think about it from this perspective. The first 10 games of the regular season last year, Derrick Henry ran for 100 yards 1 time. And now this is a guy that is supposedly worth 2 points to a point spread. Maybe the market overvaluing what Derrick Henry is worth to a team like the Tennessee Titans. With Ryan Tannehill, he means a lot, right? They like to use the play action. It makes Ryan Tannehill comfortable. But we have seen that Derrick Henry is not insanely consistent. And we saw it last year in the regular season. We saw it again. So he's at the top of this list. Completely agree with a guy like Christian McCaffrey, especially from last year when they had the issues at quarterback. Maybe the addition of a Teddy Bridgewater actually decreases the value of Christian McCaffrey, considering that, 1, he improves the quarterback position. 2, they've actually improved the wide receiving core as well. So maybe, again, we talk about the team around him getting better. Maybe the value of a guy like Christian McCaffrey lessens. And the other guys that are on this list, Saquon Barkley worth 1 point, Dalvin Cook, Josh Jacobs, Aaron Jones, and Joe Mixon, all worth half a point. Interesting that Aaron Jones is worth a half point considering that they drafted A.J. Dillon, but that's beside the point. It is Point Spread Weekly here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. Let's head out. We welcome in Steve Makinen. Nice enough to give us a couple minutes. Steve, I haven't talked to you for a while. I was off. You were off. It is good to see you again. So is this, correct me if I'm wrong, is this a milestone, a benchmark for Point Spread Weekly this week?
Yes, it is, Jonathan. Great to be with you again. This is issue number 150 of the Point Spread Weekly, the sesquicentennial, if you will.
All right.
Very special issue, I believe.
I like it. So, well, I'm just curious, your thoughts here for you. You have been involved with this since day one. What's it feel like to achieve 150 editions of this?
You know, it's gone fast. The first thing I thought about as I was doing this is, wow, it's almost 3 years ago now. And I brought up a story here. I remember sitting in on a conference call about, what are we going to call this thing? We're going to try this new weekly thing. We're going to do it for the football season only at that point. So It's grown tremendously since then. I remember hearing the words from, like, Brent Musburger brought up the title Point Spread Weekly, and it hit me. It just hit me like a ton of bricks. That's it. That is it. Brent struck gold, and to just characterize the growth that we've seen in this thing, we've expanded to issues outside of the weekly. We got previews for the different sports. We got the bowl guides, the college tournament guide. Just it's been a great thing to watch grow and transform. Yeah, and it's,
personally, I'd say too, it's really cool for me because you guys give me the opportunity to flex the writing muscles. It's funny, I'm really good at bloviating for a really long time and maybe sounding like I know what I'm talking about. But when I was a little bit younger, I actually wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be a very good writer. And so being able to do this and add to the NBA coverage and be part of the growth has been really cool. But it's not just me, right? Like, I think the coolest part about what we've done with Point Spread Weekly is how many other different voices we have that are involved in it. Like you and Humans are always a big part of it. Thule as well. But so many of the guys here at VSiN have contributed, and like periphery hosts and everything have contributed to make Point Spread Weekly what it is up to this point after 150 issues.
Yeah, I can't agree more. For like your contribution of building that great NBA preview guide last year, these are things that have grown, and it's because of the team that's been put together for this. And you got to credit Bill Adee for a lot of that. He has managed to collect some of the talent that we've been able to pull from to just continue to bring tremendous content. And I think this last few months, so when we've been challenged with the daily sports, it's made me more proud to be the editor of this thing than I've probably ever been before.
So let's dive into one of your many pieces for this week, Steve, which I thought was a really good piece. Systems for betting Sunday night games. You had the Thursday night games prior, so we got Sunday night games this week. First, let's start with this, because you note in your piece that the data that you have in terms of the database that you're using here for the stats and the spreads and the trends, you did this going back to when Thursday Night Football started, correct? Why did you do that?
Yeah, I felt the schedule was, I guess, if you look back at the last 8 years, it's been sort of a solid schedule. You know you got a Thursday night game every week. You know you got a Sunday night game, and you know you got a Monday night game. And so there's a consistency to that. Having consistency in your data is always an important thing, and that's where pretty much the reason why I started from that point.
And speaking of consistency, you also note, which is a very good point, you consistently get quality teams on Sunday night, right? Like, it's a primetime game. They want to put this out there because it's a standalone spot. The time that you're going to get poor teams is few and far between.
Yeah, so that's an important part of this particular piece. 2 weeks ago, when I talked about the Thursday night games, I thought the biggest influential thing on that is it's a change to the schedule and the routine that teams go through. But for this one, these are high-profile games usually. These are some of the best teams in the league going. So your foundational systems are going to be based upon the fact that you got quality teams playing, so it gives a little more credence to what you find.
So you noted in your Thursday night piece how important home field advantage was, and obviously, right, it kind of goes without saying. It's a short week. A team that has to travel almost gets a less day to prepare. That short turnaround on top of having to travel in terms of recovery. How important is home field for Sunday Night Football?
Well, it's actually a bit more important, I found out. Wow. A little bit surprised about this. A 55.1% home ATS record since 2012. However, when you consider the fact that these are good teams, you got good teams playing at home, it's kind of a combination for success.
Yeah. And on top of that, too, right, good teams mean quality offenses. These have been higher scoring affairs?
Yes, proven on that a lot. Although last year, I think the first 7 weeks went onto the total, I would probably tend to throw those out as I look ahead towards this season's games.
So let's take a look at some other specifics before we get to actual, games that you have written up, the Sunday night games that we know about up to this point in the National Football League. What I thought was interesting, so you had this pointed out, Thursday night games, late season Sunday night home field advantage. We talked about how much home field advantage meant overall, but if we're talking late season home field advantage Sunday night, what'd you find?
It's actually quite the opposite here on Sunday night. So you figure the Thursday night situation, the later you are into the season, the more the teams are into the routine. So having to travel for a road Thursday night game, that's a difficult spot. However, Sunday night games, that home field advantage is actually a little bit less. And this can probably be explained by the fact that you got a good team going on the road. Yep. So, I mean, the better chance that that team's going to be successful. But 22-24 straight up for hosts, 19-26-1 against the spread, which is only 42% in weeks 10 through 17 on Sunday Night Football.
And by the way, too, to build on that, again, kind of like the quality teams going up one against one another on a Sunday night spot, home favorites of 7 points or more don't do that well, correct?
Yeah, again, this is not stuff that when you look at this thing, you're surprised because you got a good road team usually, and you're catching more than 7 points. There's a good chance that team is going to be competitive. Home favorites of 7 or more last 18 matchups are just 5-12-1 against the spread. Another 29.4% spread trend there. So try to be careful laying too many points with these teams as hosts on Sunday night.
Which I find kind of interesting because I think you had another point, which is kind of not the antithesis. I'm not great with my words, but when you talked about home teams in the range of +2.5 to -6.5, like they're on a really good run as well. And I kind of thought, just thinking about it on the surface without looking at the numbers, it would be the opposite, where a team that was actually a bigger favorite would have more success. But it's the other way around, correct?
Yeah, it seems like the home field advantage is greatest when the teams are closer together. Right. I mean, that's the one deciding factor that kind of maybe makes the difference in these games. Yeah,
so those numbers, too, by the way, that we're referencing that Steve has in this piece, biggest Sunday night home field advantage has come in games closely matched opponents in the range of +2.5 to 6.5, 61-22-1 straight up, 52-29-3 ATS. That's 64.2% going back to 2012. And as you noted, Steve, going deeper on this, hosts week 1 through 9, 32-14-3 against the spread, 69.6%. So it's amazing. All these numbers actually match up with one another.
Yeah, there's not too many NFL systems you'll get that are 64% that have database samples of 80-plus games. So, I mean, there is some foundation to this that people need to consider as they're looking at the games for the season.
And one more before we get to the specific games, the scoring benchmark, the plateau. What's a successful scoring margin for teams on Sunday Night Football?
Yeah, so this is a thing that I use. I like to cite this often when I do research like this because this is something I use specifically in my own handicapping. I like to look for benchmarks where teams need to get to certain point levels to be successful. The benchmark for home team scoring on Sunday Night Football is 25 points. 24 or less, those teams cover at a 25% rate. You get 25 or more, that jumps to 76%. So that's a 50% difference. So you're looking for pretty good offenses. You figure if an offense maybe underachieves on a game, they're not covering a game. Or if they're in a tough matchup, it's in a situation where they're playing a good defense. You're not going to expect a whole lot of points. That's not a good spot for them to cover that game.
Mm-hmm. Steve Makinen with us here on Point Spread Weekly. Let's get to some of the specific games. I will say one of the games that really stuck out to me and how much this market respects the Dallas Cowboys, because when these week one lines came out with Dallas on the road and they were laying 3, I was really surprised. I think Dallas is going to be good, but I would think that, at least in terms of my own numbers, I have them a little bit closer with the Los Angeles Rams than the market does at this point. I think your market or your power ratings have them a tiny bit closer as well. But walk us through Sunday night and what you might be looking for in Dallas taking on Los Angeles on the road.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on this one, Jonathan. This kind of took me a little bit by surprise. You look at these teams, and the Rams actually had a better record last year, And once week 1 comes around, they'll have some of these week 1 systems that I think I've done a couple of them in the past on the show here. But I know one of them is playing against teams that had a worse record than the opponent the other year. So that's another thing that's going to favor the Rams here. But Dallas has been way better on Sunday night at home than they have been on the road. This is going to be obviously a new situation with Mike McCarthy coaching his first game. But this is a difficult travel scenario. I think you got a Rams team that's probably going to maybe feel a little bit of disrespect here from this line. I don't know, especially without fans in the stands. That's not really a big deal for the Rams. I mean, they're used to playing in the semi-empty stadium as it is. So I'd have a little bit of trouble laying the points here with Dallas in this one. Right.
It's funny. We talked about that on the Edge earlier today because I don't know if you saw the report. The Jags are going to be operating at like 25%. And
I did see that on a tweet today.
And it's like, so they're going to be operating it as usual. Like that's not that big of a blow, but some people might think it is. And so maybe the market overreacts to something like that, and you find a small advantage with the Jaguars at home because people think that's a detriment when really it might not be.
Yeah, and as you look at, even I imagine if we're going to go to a next game here, that week 2 game, a team like Seattle, it's going to be a detriment to them to not have fans in the stands. That's a team that relies on that 12th man aspect and the home field advantage they gain from that.
Yep. Well, give us some details on that because the Patriots haven't really done well on the road on Sunday night, correct?
Yeah, 0-3 skid here, which is rare for see anything real negative about a Bill Belichick Patriots team having some negative trends. But they've lost 3 straight on Sunday night on the road. This is one of the furthest travel arrangements that any team has to face anytime in the NFL, going from coast to coast here. They're going to be going to Seattle. However, the only thing here is unfamiliarity in these AFC, NFC games hasn't worked out that well for home teams. So I don't really have a real opinion on this one, as I think it's probably going to be a lower scoring game. I have a feeling you'll be looking at a place where you'll maybe push on a number here or get a Patriots upset.
All right, one more I want to ask you about before we get to a couple more things that you have up in Point Spread Weekly this week, but I wanted to go up ahead to Week 9. New Orleans on the road, taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. 2 things stuck out to me when reading your piece, specifically about this game. One, your line versus the game line. The other is that Tampa Bay, and this hadn't struck me, but they haven't really been a great team, the fact that they haven't appeared on Sunday Night Football at all in the past, 12 years?
Yeah, this is landmark territory for the Buccaneers. I've talked with you several times here about how much I like what Tampa Bay is bringing to the table. I was kind of hoping there'd be a longer, more defined training camp here, as I think that would help Tampa Bay a lot here. We'll have to see how that plays out here. But this is going to be one of the biggest games of the year for the Buccaneers, I think, hosting New Orleans on Sunday night. Assuming all things go as maybe they're supposed to, this is going to be a very high-profile game Sunday night for first time in a long time on Tampa. Looking forward to seeing how this actually plays out.
All right, so let's move on again. So check that out. Systems for betting Sunday Night Football. We haven't even scratched the surface of what Steve has in this week's edition of Point Spread Weekly. Every single Sunday night game that is set, write-ups for that, some systems, and there's actually a couple more in terms of betting systems that we didn't even touch on with Steve. So don't want to give it all away, but check it out at VSiN.com/subscribe. PSW free until the major sport returns for you. I wanted to go. You know this. You've seen me on Twitter, Steve, so you know that one of the things that I've really been getting into is NASCAR and following this from a statistical standpoint. So, of course, every single week we have your simulations. So walk us through what came up with the simulations. And, again, for people who are just tuning in, your process for these simulations, because the one you see in Point Spread Weekly is not going to be the final one.
Okay, so I do have my final one ready here.
Do it.
This is so I have Kyle Busch actually coming on top on this one.
Okay.
This is going to be interesting here because I've watched a lot of the people handicapping this race so far this week. One of the interesting factors here that I'm not hearing being said much is there's a lot of people looking at momentum. However, the last 3 races, the Indianapolis and the 2 Poconos, are at tracks that I deem very, very similar. Mm-hmm. Okay, they're and widely different from Kentucky. So I wouldn't put too much on momentum. There's obviously anybody who was able to run good at the first race at Pocono is probably going to run good the next 2 weeks because they're going to keep the setup they had there. Those are very similar tracks. This is going to be different. This has Kentucky Speedway has a handicap ability grade of A on my scale. It's number 4 out of the 24 tracks as far as the ability to statistically handicap these races. So this is one you're probably going to want to pay attention to when the final simulation comes out on the VSiN newsletter.
Yep. And so if you look at the simulation, for those who are watching, at the top of the simulation, you mentioned you ran it again. So you said it was Harvick?
Kyle Busch on top of Harvick. Two very heavy favorites, though. These guys separated themselves from the rest of the 36 drivers pretty significantly. So I think it's going to come down to those two guys. The other guys I have as contenders: Joey Logano, Chase Elliott, Ryan Blaney, and Brad Keselowski. I probably wouldn't go deeper than that.
Yep, my preliminary research, as you know, we do it now every single week on The Edge. Some of the names that did pop up, Harvick was up there. His track history has been awesome. Busch is up there as well. I wanted to ask you really quickly two questions. One about the momentum, because I would agree with you, and the more I've learned, right, obviously with Pocono and the similarities of what we've seen through these tracks. How about a guy, though, like the one that I've focused on the last few weeks? Eric Almirola has been great for 5 races, right? It's not just these 3. He's got 5 consecutive top 5s, but track history is not great here. So what do you think that means for a guy like him?
Yeah, he's actually one of the guys I was thinking of because I know there's been a lot made about how he's had was it 5 straight top 5s? I think it was. He's been solid, obviously. Coming for a good team though, so I mean there's a foundation for him doing what he's doing now. However, this is a big transition. I just want to warn people relying on that type of thing that this is a big transition going from Indianapolis to Kentucky. These are 2 completely different tracks. All
right, Steve, we're up against it. Only 30 seconds left, but give us one last spiel. 150th edition of Point Spread Weekly.
That about sums it up here. It's been a great run. This is a great week to kind of celebrate that issue. We've got a lot of great things in there. UFC's the cover focus. I have another piece in there on Major League Baseball. I'm going to be doing a couple more pieces in the coming weeks about baseball. We got the usual great golf coverage from Cannon, Reynolds, and Humans. So just a ton of great stuff to read in this week's issue, and looking forward to another 150 more, right?
That's right, and we'll still be here. All right, Steve, we'll talk to you soon, okay?
All right, sounds good, Jonathan. Thanks for having me.
Plenty left here on Point Spread Weekly. Don't go anywhere. Remember, VSiN.com/subscribe. Welcome back in Point Spread Weekly. I'm Jonathan Von Tobel. Again, VSiN.com/subscribe is the spot. Sign up for PSW. Take advantage, man. It's free until major sport returns. We got plenty of time, so come on, let's go. All right, let's head out to welcome in William Hill, not like the William Hill, and that's actually his Twitter account, @NotTheWillHill, who has done a great job giving us a really detailed preview of the National Football League week by week. Will, always good to talk to you, man. Let's dive right in. Probable regression sinks 49ers in the West. Walk me through this because you write about it in your piece. I thought about it as well. I don't think last time you and I talked about Green Bay, right? Green Bay was a fraudulent 13-3 team. I don't think San Francisco was fraudulent, but how good they were last year leads them to regression coming up this year, correct?
Yeah, no doubt about it. And that Super Bowl hangover, I mean, it's not just a media creation, it's real. I mean, the last team to go over its season win total after losing the Super Bowl was the Broncos back 2013 into 2014. Wow. And if you just rewatch the game against Seattle, the season finale, I mean, Jacob Hollister, first of all, they had first and goal from the 1. Then the Seahawks, they got Jacob Hollister. They hit him with the pass. The ball probably gets in. If any part of the ball crosses any part of the goal line, it's a touchdown just the way it's worded. I mean, they were that close, inches, maybe not even inches, from losing the NFC West. And they just had a lot of coin flips, and it's hard to climb that mountain again, 2 years in a row, especially when you come that close. I mean, you can't come as close as the Niners did to winning the Super Bowl without actually winning it. Up 10, fourth quarter, with the ball, and you don't get home. And that's a tough division. There's not an easy game in there. Even the Rams, who aren't, they look to be going in the wrong direction. You got them, the Cardinals on the way up, and the Seahawks are a solid team. It's not going to be easy for them. And you could still, 10.5 is a big number. If you're playing under there, you could still get and have double-digit wins and cash the under.
So when we're talking about the regression, right? The Baltimore Ravens, for example, I peg them as a team that's going to regress, but still could likely win their division and make it into the postseason. How bad is the regression in your mind for San Francisco? Are we still talking playoff team, or are they out entirely in your mind?
I think it's fringe. If you look at some of the other trend they have working against them, some of these teams that have huge win jumps from one year to the next, the 2006 Saints, the 2008 Dolphins, 2017 the Jags and the Eagles. Usually when you have a huge jump like that from year 1 to year 2, year 3 you fall somewhere back in the middle. It's like if a hitter, the 1 month he hits 200 and next month he hits 300, chances are he's like a 250 hitter. So I think the Niners, they're going to be on the fringe. I think getting plus 250, probably get a little higher, as always, shot for the best number. I think it's a good value. I think they're going to be right on the fringe. I see 9-10 wins. I could see them winning 8. I could see them right in that ballpark where I think plus 250 is a good value.
So if we're talking about this division overall, who's the winner in your mind of the NFC West?
I'll go with Seattle. I'm going to hedge my bet a little. I like Seattle. You can get them. I couldn't believe this. Minus 125-ish to make the playoffs. Yep. I know they're not an analytics darling. They won a lot of close games last year. They were a pretty lucky team, and they don't embrace analytics. They love to run the ball in 1st and 10, 2nd and 10. They don't really throw until they need to. They kind of play backwards. They played 1993 version of football. But I think if you look at Wilson, he's been in the league 8 years. 7 of the 8 years he's made the playoffs. 7 of the 8 years, 10 wins or more. The 8th year, what did he do? 9-7 and missed the playoffs. That's his worst year. And if you're looking at Seattle to make the playoffs, so with the extra wild card spot and how balanced the NFC is, besides the Giants and the Redskins, there's really not a terrible team. I think Carolina is going to be competitive. So what does that mean? That last wild card spot, 9 wins probably gets you in. I would hedge my bet and take the Seahawks just to make the playoffs. I think that's the best value on the board there.
You mentioned not being a friend of analytics. I was actually talking about this the other day, and I'll pick your brain on this. We got about a minute left, Will. But the plus 7-point differential, the fact that they're barely getting by, and you kind of alluded to this, how much of that is just the style that they play? Because how many times in the fourth quarter they just go, oh, yeah, we have an all-pro quarterback. Russ, can we go win the game, please? Like, they could actually be better if they actually opened their playbook up a little bit more and gave it to a Russell Wilson.
Yeah, it seems like they're going to be the last ones to find out that they have a great quarterback. We're all sitting there watching the game saying, hey, if you're rooting against him, you're saying, please don't throw it. If you're rooting for him, say, come on, just throw it. Maybe the light will go on. I know Carroll's an older guy, and there seems to be a divide between the younger and the older. I could promise you if McVay was the coach, they'd be throwing a lot more. I think that's a generational gap. We'll only wait and see. I think they're doing themselves a disservice by the way they play, but we'll see how they play this year.
William Hill at not the Will Hill up on Twitter. Will, always good to talk to you, man. And if you have anything this week, do you have anything in golf this weekend?
I took Vegas 100-1. I'm still recovering from Wolf last week, 150-1. That was brutal.
Karma has bitten him right in the keister because he's not doing very well so far. Will, we're up against him, man. Thanks a lot.
See you, JVT. Take care, buddy.
Got it. And by the way, again, there's more for William Hill's piece, so check that out up in Point Spread Weekly. There's one more team, I won't give it away, in his write-up, though, in the NFC West that says, he says, yeah, take the price on yes to make the playoffs. It's in the range of 3-1. I'm not going to tell you who it is because you can find out for free. VSiN.com/subscribe. Ron Flatter on the other side. I'm told cashing tickets is what it's all about. So if you want to do that, go to VSiN.com/subscribe. Sign up for Points With Weekly. It's free until the major sport returns. Let us head out and welcome in Ron Flatter, one of my favorite weekly spots. It's funny, Ron, as I have matured over the last few years, 10 years ago, young John Von Tobel, I'm like, NASCAR, horse racing, I don't care about that stuff. Now it's like I am fascinated by this because you and the guy like Michael Gaughan and Motley, you know so much about it, and I love learning. So this has become one of my favorite spots of the week. So let's talk about some horse racing. First up, Uncle Chuck joining the top 4 Derby picks. Victory at Los Alamitos Derby. Impressive, no?
It was impressive. There's no doubt about that. In fact, his finishing times for that 1 1/8 in the Los Alamitos Futurity were the fastest for any horse that's on the Kentucky Derby Trail for the final furlong or the final 3 furlongs of any 1 1/8 prep or longer. We're talking about what we were seeing, 11.9, I think, were the time for the last furlong and 36.3 seconds for the last 3. Remember our bar that we set for these things to be a Kentucky Derby contender? 13 or under for the last furlong, 38 or under for the last 3. More than a second better. If you think about that, if you're thinking more than a second better, there's 5 lengths per second for a horse we're talking about, let's see now, about 12, 13 lengths in that last 3 furlongs. So a very impressive finish for him. Can he do that again? His next prep, what will be the next prep? He's not even Derby qualified yet because that was a race that got him some points, winning the Los Alamitos Futurity, but maybe not enough to get to the Derby. We'll see what happens in his next race. But right now, 8-1 at Circa, 12-1 at William Hill, the 4th choice right now in Derby betting.
Really quickly, any worry that he would miss out on the Derby in terms of qualification, or is there enough for him? Like, he'll be there?
Depends on who you talk to, because we're still in uncharted territory with all these new preps that were added because of the delayed Derby. Bob Baffert thinks the Derby could be undersubscribed and there won't be 20 horses. We'll see.
I like it. All right. So let's talk a couple of other things really quickly. So 'tis the law, as you note here, and we'll talk about the books and maybe one certain operator, as you put it, culling down their odds and the pool in which they're using. But any worry at all, like how hot is Uncle Chuck in terms of maybe getting closer to 'tis the law or supplanting 'tis the law by the time we get to the Kentucky Derby?
Depends on his next race.
Yeah.
But 'tis the law still hasn't done anything wrong since he had that race in the slop last year. On dry tracks, he's undefeated. But he actually drifted at Circa to plus 290. William Hill cut him to plus 220. Circa drifted a lot of horses. It suggests they're going to call their herd pretty soon. William Hill did cut him from plus 250 to plus 220. But there's a lot of recency bias here, JVT. So next time 'tis the law's on the track, next month at the Travers, if he goes and wins that and looks impressive, suddenly there's going to be a ton of money going in on him.
Yep. So as we've talked about this, and we've had you on for like what? It's been like almost feels like 3 months now at this point, as we've talked about
4.
Yeah, right. Yeah, these Kentucky Derby odds and how big this pool has been. So if you're sitting out there and if you're a bettor who are looking at these fixed odds, again, fixed winners for the Kentucky Derbies, in your mind, how do you handle this? Do you just sit back and wait as we wait for more of these races to play out? Because you note too, as you're sitting here and looking at what's going on with this in this piece, you have to assess this current value. But how do you do that with this field and where these odds all stand right now?
3 months ago, I'm looking at 100-1. Right now, 100-1 looks desperate. I'm kind of looking for middling horses a little bit if I haven't bet into it already. Now, I've got 10 tickets right now in the futures, so I'm probably done betting those. But if you're just coming in, look at a horse like Max Player, was 3rd in the Belmont. You can get him at 45-1 at William Hill. New York Traffic, 60-1 at William Hill, was 2nd in the Matt Winn on the same race course as they'll run the Kentucky Derby. Granted, there'll be another turn in the Derby, but you look at horses like that and say, could they be in the gate? Could they be a contender? Am I getting a good price? I think with those two, you could be.
Yep. And there has been like this tier, right? There's 4 horses at the top, and then you have the rest of the pack in terms of the odds.
Yeah, you do. You have 'Tis the Law. You have Honor, AP, and Authentic, the 1-2 horses in the Santa Anita Derby. Honor AP won't race again until August 1st in the Shared Belief at Del Mar. Authentic is going to go next weekend in the Haskell for Bob Baffert, a race that he has won 8 times. Authentic might be a slight value right now, although at 6-1, I'm not sure that's real value. I think I just watch and wait. Maybe not get quite as good odds on post time at the Derby, but 6-1 seems a little expensive at the moment.
All right, Ron. We talked about Uncle Chuck, part of your who's not. Who's hot. Give us the rest of your hot horses.
Well, 1,000 Words finished 2nd to Uncle Chuck. Also had sub 13 and 38 times for his finishing part of the Los Al Futurity. Was the track hot that day? We'll find out his next race. We don't know what that will be yet. Major Fed was hot, but he's just a bad luck horse. Finished 2nd in the Indiana Derby this week, still 100-1. I'd be passing on him. And who's not? Cezanne, the $3.5 million Bob Baffert colt. He's just not looked flashy in his 2 wins. Anno Dor was scratched from the Los Al Futurity with a fever. And somebody went in to Circa and bet on Club Aspen, a 2-for-10 horse. They gave him 400-1 odds. Yeah, good luck. That's wallpaper.
If 100-1 is desperate, what is 400-1?
Insane.
All right, Ron, before we get you out of here, let us know what's going on with the Ron Flatter Racing Pod.
Hank Goldberg, what a great storyteller, talks about not only tomorrow's Bluegrass Stakes at Keeneland, but tells us a lot of stories past and present. We have the trainer, Tommy Drury of Art Collector, kind of a buzz horse going into the race that has a filly in it, of course. And you're looking at Swiss Skydiver being the favorite, the filly, but Art Collector might be able to win this one for the boys. And he talks about his horse. Chris Andrews handicaps the Bluegrass Stakes and more. Get the Ron Flatter Racing Pod, Apple, Google, iHeart, Spotify, Stitcher, or vsin.com/podcasts. And as always, sponsored by First Bet.
Can you give us the 90 seconds on Bluegrass this weekend?
Bluegrass this weekend. Look, a lot of the money's going to be poured in on the filly, Swiss Skydiver, and as you look at her, I don't know that her style is right. Man on the Can is the horse I'm looking at to kind of chase the pace and come and make that first run off the lead and maybe get 10-1. So that's the horse I'm looking at. Of course, I'm always looking for value. Not necessarily always the best horse, but we'll see in the Bluegrass.
That's right. They value buy and low to a certain extent, right, Ron? So you're always going to take a risk there. Ron Flatter, the Big F, Ron Flatter, up on Twitter as well. Ron, thanks as always, man. Always good to talk to you.
All right. Thanks, JVT.
Yep, you got it. Again, Ron Flatter, check out the piece. It's every single week in Point Spread Weekly. This week, Uncle Chuck joining the top 4 Derby picks. Ron's done a great job tracking these future odds. First posted at William Hill, now up at Circa, these fixed futures in terms of winning the Kentucky Derby outright. It has been a fascinating journey cutting this down from as many horses as they had to where it's at, and we still have all this time to go until we get to the Kentucky Derby in September. So check it out, VSiN.com/subscribe. Remember, these Point Spread Weekly is free if the VSiN Plus sub is subscribed for, and check that out until the major sport returns. All right, when we come back, it is a massive weekend because Fight Island is alive. UFC 251 was a stacked card already, but now Jorge Masvidal checks in, forced to cut 22 pounds this week to get ready for the matchup with Kamaru Usman. He's done it. He's weighed in. The fight is on. The question is, who will win that one and the rest of the bouts? Well, Lou Finocchiaro Gamblu is going to join us to break that all down, give us his thoughts on that matchup and what we're going to see over in Abu Dhabi. Last few minutes here on Point Spread Weekly. Let's head right out because it's a big weekend over at Fight Island. Lou Finocchiaro live from Abu Dhabi. No, I don't think he's out there. But he is nice enough to give us a couple of minutes to break down UFC 251. Lou, let's start with this because you and I have had this conversation, right? The importance of the weight cut, the importance of how these fighters handle this weight cut. Well, one fighter, Jorge Masvidal, had to cut 22 pounds in the span of 6 days. He weighed in on Friday. Everything was fine. But what do you make of the quick turnaround here for Masvidal just in terms of the weight cut?
I'm not really too concerned about it because Masvidal's exaggerating in everything that he's doing. He's trained more than he wants to let on.
Yep.
And he says he was 22 pounds over. Okay. But he won't even be 190 come fight time. He'll be $184. So I think it's all a ruse and smoke and mirrors myself.
Yeah. Well, and you kind of alluded to it there. We actually played a clip on The Edge earlier today. Dustin Poirier, who was, part of a camp with him and Masvidal was training, he said the whole time Masvidal was actually prepping from a game plan standpoint for Usman. Like from a preparation and game plan perspective, Jorge Masvidal has been getting ready for Usman. So if we're looking at it from that prism, he's ready for Kamaru Usman coming up this weekend.
I would say so. I'd be willing to lay a hefty number that we will see Masvidal as focused, as beguiling, and he'll use every trick that he has to try and beat Usman.
Yep.
I believe that.
So give us the breakdown here because Usman, from the standpoint of what he wants to do, I would assume, because it's just the style that he fights with, but the other is it would work against a guy like Masvidal, is to work him, put him up against the cage, put him on the ground, wear him down. Do you think he'll be able to do that against Jorge Masvidal this weekend?
I think he'll be able to do it in relative ease. As soon as he finds out how fast and fluid Masvidal is as a stand-up striker, Usman will this thing is going to get ugly, and we're going to see Masvidal early and often on the bottom position of an ugly wrestling match that's going to last 25 minutes.
How much does it worry you? Because we've seen this before, where certain fighters who are more prone and more successful on the ground will find some success standing up and then start to go in that direction because they found success. I bring this up because the Colby Covington fight, it was strictly on the feet for Kamaru Usman, and he worked Covington. He broke his jaw. He looked really good. Do you fear that maybe, one, because of the emotional aspect, not liking Jorge Masvidal, and the other being that he had success on his feet last time out, that he kind of gets the game plan wrong and tries to fight a little bit more standing up than he should?
for a minute till he gets pieced, and then he and his corner will get off of that. And quite honestly, if you really watch that Colby Covington fight, Covington was the quicker, more precise striker. Usman was slow, and that's going to potentially hurt him against Masvidal if he plays the stand-up game.
So when you look at this, and again in Point Spread Weekly, Lou writes up all of these fights. Now I know that your official lean here was to the over. Walk us through this, because I thought so as well. And since your write-up, this has actually moved. 4.5 is shaded to the under at William Hill at minus 150. I'm looking at plus 130 on the over 4.5. And before you and I have even talked right now, that was circled immediately for myself.
I expect Masvidal money between now and fight time.
Yep.
He's the hotter athlete, and with Masvidal money comes inside the distance. I can't see Masvidal winning a decision unless Usman has the worst game plan in the history of the UFC. And so the reason I like the over is because I think Usman's going to get on top, and this is going to just be a bore fest. Dominant performance by him. And I will say, as this Usman line is dropping, if it gets to Usman minus 200, I start getting involved in Usman. I got to be honest.
Yeah, minus 220 right now. Masvidal plus 190. Those numbers over at William Hill that I'm listing off. Let's go to the next bout up. This is going to be a good one. Volkanovski, Max Holloway, the rematch here. Volkanovski in the range of about a 220 favorite over Holloway in this featherweight championship bout. First time around, we talk about game plans, right? Max Holloway, check a leg kick, bro, because he didn't the entire time. His leg got worked. He had to switch stances, and it was a big reason why he lost that fight. Can he reverse this? Do you think he gets a little bit smarter and fights a little bit more tactile and realizes that he has to work that part of the game as well?
I don't know how he gets smarter. He fought the smartest fight Max Holloway fights in the last fight. What he can do is change his slow start. The risk at doing that means in forcing the fight to Alexander Volkanovski, he leaves himself to coming in and therefore being taken down by a pretty stout wrestler. And so while Holloway doesn't want to go to the left-hand stance because that's not his best. I don't know what he can change to change the outcome of this fight. In fact, I look for Volkanovski, and you know, Jonathan, that I'm an underdog guy, but I look for Volkanovski, whose price is compressing as well. I look for him to be dominant. This is the under fight of the main card, in my opinion.
Yeah, over 4.5, heavily shaded, minus 235, depending on where you look. And these are numbers if you're watching via FanDuel and Westgate. I'm curious, when I was researching this card and watching past fights, the more, at least when it came to the main card, I thought this seems like a card that is going to lend itself to some favorites this weekend. Am I crazy for that?
That's generally what I feel as well, but in tracking these cards, it's 63% so far this year.
True.
So, out of 13 of these fights, we're going to get 3 or 4 dogs. My job's to try and find them.
Yep. All right, let's talk about Jan and Aldo then. This is for the vacant bantamweight championship. Jan in the range of a 240 favorite over Aldo. What do you make of this? Again, so researching this, Jan he's a guy I haven't watched a lot of. Kind of meticulous with his striking, it seems, but a lot of power. So, like when he lands a strike, you are going to feel it. The Rivera fight, he was back and forth with Rivera, but ultimately pulls that one out, and Uriah Faber played right into his hands. But what do you make of this matchup with Aldo?
Yeah, I'm not as convinced of Jan's power. I think he's more pitter patter. Now he looked good against Jimmy Rivera, but they were lining up to try and expose Jimmy Rivera, and Faber is a game fighter, but he's 40 years old. So Jan, the criticism to Jan in this fight is that he's giving away vast experience to Aldo. But 4 years ago, he trained with Aldo down in Brazil for a few months as well. He's a master of boxing and a master of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Russia. And those titles are really, really hard to come by. I'm not worried about Jan's experience. In fact, I like the fact he's 27 against a guy in Aldo that really had great days, but we're going to say goodbye to Jose Aldo after this fight. I think he's washed and finished.
Any opinion at all on Andrade and Namajunas? I know it was not part of your write-up. We'll get to the other one that we have on there, but anything there? And I don't think really anything on Van Zandt, right? Massive dog. Van Zandt's not very good, and it seems like this is just a terrible matchup for her.
Van Zandt's a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and Ribas has fought nobody. Her win over Mackenzie Dern is a pipe win. Dern is not that good. Paige Van Zandt is tougher than John Wayne Saddle, and I think this price has gotten out of whack, not in the fact that I would consider Paige Van Zandt on a straight bet, but I love the over in this fight. Okay. Over 2.5. When's the last time you seen two 125-pound women in a 30-foot cage with an over-under that was only minus 15 to the over? I really have a strong feel to the over, Jonathan.
I like it. And nothing with Andrade and Namajunas, right?
Nothing really there. I mean, I'm watching to see. I expect Namajunas to piece her up, and I hate to be so chalky on the whole main card, but that's just how I'm seeing it.
No, of course. So sometimes it works out that way, right, Lou? All right, what other bouts should we be looking at? I know you have one more on this piece, so give us the breakdown and maybe any others on the prelims that people should be watching.
Yes, on the prelims, there's a great Russian versus Brazil battle, and those are epic battles because they have a lot of pride in each fight expertise, and there's a high competition between the two countries. Sakalov, a welterweight, is going to fight Eliseo Zaleski dos Santos, and we better get used to some of these names over the next few weeks. This is going to be a striking battle where Sakalov, the Russian, is giving away way too much. The other kid is bigger, stronger, faster, and has faced better. And Eliseo dos Santos is plus 115, plus 120, depending where you shop. And then earlier in the fight card, there's a fight that I've been on all week, and then the opponent happened to come in today and miss weight by 4 pounds. So the opponent's clearly angling for advantage in the fight, but in the stare downs, I really liked what I saw out of my kid. It's a fight that is a bantamweight fight. It's early in the card, and there's a young 24-year-old Brazilian named Pavia. He's minus 180 or 175 against a little regional fighter named Zumagulov. Excuse the pronunciation of the name. Zumagulov's a regional guy that's beaten UFC caliber fighters, and he's game, and he's plus 155. I'll hang my hat on those two underdogs, Jonathan.
I like it. Hey, before we get you out of here, just your general thoughts, and maybe it didn't factor in your handicapping at all. First prelim fight is set to go off local time at 2 a.m. Do you think there's any effect whatsoever?
Very little. I don't think these kids, they're too young, and they're already acclimating to what time their fights are. Except for Usman and Masvidal, all these kids been there for a normal fight week.
Yep, I like it. Lou Finocchiaro, again, check out the write-up in Point Spread Weekly. They're there every single week. Lou, always appreciate it. I swear this is the last one. We got about a minute and a half left. But you and I have talked a little bit behind the scenes and on Twitter. You know how much I've been getting a little bit more into this. And you write about this in Point Spread Weekly a couple of times. The stats and analytics that is available for mixed martial arts, and especially the UFC, is incredible. And I actually found another wealth of knowledge last night, Fightnomics. But fill people in, man, because I think a lot of people think fighting, there's not that much to it. But analytically, there's a lot available for handicappers.
I went to read the Fightnomics book about 4 years ago so I could criticize the writer, and I felt it would be only reasonable for me to read his work before I chopped his legs off. And when I was done reading it, I became his biggest disciple. Not only that, his numbers in the book only go to 2013. I've updated all those numbers. I got guys that help me. He put the seed in my brain, and I'm running with it now.
Dude, I was like a kid at a candy store last night. It's incredible. Lou Finocchiaro, again, Point Spread Weekly, the write-up in there every single week for every single one of these cards. Lou, always good to talk to you. We'll catch up next week, okay?
Thanks, Jonathan. Keep up the UFC support, brother.
You got it. You know I will. Very excited for UFC 251 this weekend. It is going to be an absolute banger. All right. You know what I'm going to tell you right now? You probably have already done it because, I don't know, why wouldn't you? VSiN.com/subscribe. Sign up. VSiN Plus subs are free until those major sport returns. And guess what? Everything you just watched right now, you get all that cool analysis and much more because I couldn't even get to all of it over the last hour. All right? So until then, we'll see you next weekend.